Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. And if you are watching the replay on YouTube, thank you for watching this as well. My name is Professor Kelsey Coes. This is the Divination Academy, and this is my series. I believe I called it the Divine Masculine Devotionals. And I am going to be talking all about the Greek god Hades today. I am really, really excited to be talking about him. He is one of my patron deities. I absolutely adore him. I have a very strong connection to him. I very much love him. I feel he's very much misunderstood, which makes a lot of sense though, because there's very, very little writings about him. He doesn't pop up a lot of places. He wasn't very highly venerated and highly honored in ancient times. So we don't have a lot to know about like practices that come with him. He's in very few myths, and a lot of them that he's actually typically like in the background, and not really being seen or noticed. He rarely ever leaves his own realm. And the most common myth that everybody knows about him has to deal with his wife Persephone, which I've done a class already on Persephone, and I went in super, super, super detailed about that story. I am going to touch on it today because we have to, because it's Hades, but I'm not going to go through like a ton of details, or I'm going to try not to, so it's not super repetitive. It might happen though, because I adore those two, and their story and interpretation that I have of it is a little bit different than others. So we're going to talk about that a lot. We're going to go over the myths that he is in. We're going to talk about who he is, how to connect him, how to honor him, and then I am going to bring him in for you guys today. I am really, really excited to do that for you. And just a precursor, he literally will most likely be absolutely completely silent for you if he comes up. That is usually how he appears. He is very, very stoic, very silent. But the energy that he holds you in is it's very, very intense, but it really, really opens up your heart space. That's really what he opens up for me. He really kind of like forces you in this very like silence challenging way to really have to sit in the message that you need to receive. And if justice needs to be served, he can have a wrath, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. So I'm really, really, really excited to talk about him today. Before I get going, does anybody need the link to the study guide? I did already put it in the chat. Otherwise, does anybody have anything that they want to say about Hades right away, or anything that they want to ask, or anything like that at all? Because you definitely can. Now is the time. Otherwise, we can just get going right away. And if that's the case, you guys can give me some thumbs up and we can head on into my study guide. Let's see. Oh. Okay, I have a thumbs up. Okay, I'm just gonna go in. I don't see any questions, any comments, any hands being raised. So we're gonna go in then. Fabulous. Oh yeah, if you're watching the replay, I realize I probably should start saying this, and you need the study guide since I teach so much directly off of mine. You can just go to our website, divination.com, divinationacademy.com. And then the study guide's underneath the study guide section, and then it's going to be underneath the divine masculine subsection. And the study guide for Hades will be there. I'm going to link it right after class here, so it'll be right there for you if you need access to that. If you're not an enrolled student, and if you are an enrolled student, it should be in the chat for you as well. Always, you can always just go back in the chat and find it that way too. If you ever can't find it on the website, or for some reason that's just the way you like to get it too. So fabulous. So we're gonna jump into that study guide. Okay, so Hades, first and foremost, who is he? He is part of the Greek pantheon. He is considered, I actually a lot of times refer to him as king. I refer to it that way, or Lord Hades. I do that a lot as well. It's just as a sign of respect for me and the connection that we have. That's a lot of times what happens to me. Typically, you'll see him just referenced as God of the underworld. Sometimes like I said, you'll see him like king of the underworld as well. But typically, it's just God of the underworld most of the times. But he's considered God of the underworld, which gives him power and control over all the souls who reside there. And big disclaimer here, he's not God of the dead. So he's not like the Reaper, that's Thanos. Like that's not Thanos. Sorry, Thanos. That's not Hades. Like that's not his responsibility. He's not like the transporter of souls. He literally is the one who resides over the underworld. He's the one that resides over that domain and has control over that domain and that power. That also spreads to other things as well. And we're going to talk about that too. But that is who he's known as. That is what he is. And a lot of times, still today, the concept of working with him has actually seemed pretty controversial, because of a lot of the religious dogma that's attached to him and also attached to his name. Because I'm going to talk about it later as well in more detail. But his name is also synonymous with the name of the actual underworld in Greek mythology and culture. Like his name is also the name of the underworld. So Hades is synonymous for the actual realm. It's their equivalent of, Christianity's version of hell. So a lot of times, because of that synonymous and because he's referred to in that way, they were really hesitant to worship him. They were really hesitant to be connected to him. And if they did, to be open about it. There were, I'm going to talk about it later. There was one massive, temple complex for him, and he was kind of part of the Elysium mysteries as well. But for the most part, like, he really wasn't venerated or honored that much. And when he was, it was really in connection to Persephone. And even the biggest myth about him, he's not the biggest main character. It's really more about Demeter and Persephone in that one. He's really even like a side character in like his main major myth. So they were really hesitant to worship him and respect him. So he really kind of, like I said, there's not a lot about him. There's not a lot of writings about him. He doesn't show up a lot of places. And when he is brought up, it's very brief. It's about 10 sentences usually, or 10 lines that there is about him at most. Like, that's literally the most that there is of him in a story. Otherwise, he's really seen as like in the background. He's mentioned as a background character, except for a few, which I'll talk about later. And again, we're really hesitant to worship him and talk about him because, the very common belief amongst ancient Greece was that the afterlife was that, you would wander endlessly as a shade from your former lives unless you had done something heroic. And then you would actually be able to be honored, and Hades would host you in the afterlife. Another belief is that you needed to actually be like honorably buried as well. Like, if you were unburied, you were actually like doomed to be a shade as well, wandering, endlessly, existing. Honestly, it's a very interesting afterlife. Personally, I have my own feelings about it. But for some, it was an absolute miserable existence that they didn't want to be a part of. So because of that, and because of his connection to that, that's another reason why there just isn't a lot about him. He wasn't venerated that much. There's not a lot there to him. He had, like I talked about briefly before, a couple of very few temples. He had an Necronomicon, which was dedicated to him and his and Persephone as well. And there's some specific festivals that had to do with them, but like I said, most of them had to do with the actual like changing of the seasons, which he ends up, if you really think about it, he's a really big part of even the changing of the seasons being created and happening. If it really wasn't for him, they really probably wouldn't exist. If you look at it from that point of view within those stories. So he's really only honored in that sense, and when it comes to like the changing the seasons in that sense. And then with the dead, he's very much connected to the dead and like funerally and things like that, and spirits of the dead, and going into the afterlife and the afterworld. But for the most part, like I said, in ancient times, like, people didn't engage with him. So people still today have a really hard time with that, because that dogma hasn't been completely stripped away yet. That dogma still really is attached to him. He's really seen as this like dark deity, this dark entity that just like lurks in the shadows and like is very like merciless and malevolent, and just like he just like hates everybody, and pulls Persephone off of Earth into the underworld against her will and rapes her, and like all of this stuff. And it's just it's for me, it's very much laced in dogma, and I'm going to work really hard to try to break that as we go through this today, because my view of him is very different. The way he comes off to me is very, very different. And I had been working with him, I want to say it's probably about 8, 9 years, 10 years maybe at this point. He was one of the first deities I ever really interacted with. He presented himself to me after his wife did. And I talked about how she presented herself to me with Persephone, and in my class about her. So if you want to learn more about her, again, go watch that, because I talk about that a lot with her. But I really want to talk about like really who he is as a core. But again, we'll get to this. We'll break that dogma. We'll break through it. Okay, so when it comes to who he was, because he ruled over various elements of, death, because he was a ruler of death and underworld, and like part of that, that ties into elements of life as well. So he was also tied into the concept of harvest and wealth and prosperity. because he ruled the riches within the soils as well. He ruled the prosperity and riches within the soils as well. That was within the underworld and within the realm within him. So they recognized him and honored him in that way to understand the importance of, like, we need to venerate him because we need all that good, juicy awesomeness that's in the underworld depths, that prosperity, that wealth to come up within our harvest so that we have harvest, prosperity, and wealth. And then they also venerated him in a way of understanding that, like, he controlled the entrance into the afterlife. And in your afterlife, he actually plays a pretty passive role, which I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. He's actually pretty passive. But he does control, like, where you end up within the afterlife for the most part. He's a pretty passive judge, but he does have, kind of final say and control over that. He's typically depicted with a very somber expression, usually with a beard. He's known for also having his helmet, which is known as the Helm of Darkness, which he actually gets from a Cyclops, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And it's also known as the Cap of Invisibility. He also has, his companion Cerberus, the three-headed dog, who guards the entrance of the underworld. He's known for having her. He's known for his name being referenced to as the Unseen One. It literally translates to unseen or sightless or invisible one. And that has to do with his attachment to death. And that's really a condition that, the dead have. Like, they're unseen, they're invisible, like they're sightless. They're really not there interacting. Like, you can't see them in your everyday life. They're there interacting with you, but they're really invisible and pulled back. And I think that's a big reason why you see him represented that way a lot of times as well in a lot of the myths, and why he doesn't pop up as a lot, because he really is, like, his name really does translate to that unseen, that invisible, that sightless. He's really representing that connection to death and to your deceased loved ones and who they are. He's also known, like I said, for being the giver of wealth, and he's attached to the planet of Pluto, and he's known as Pluton. A lot of times that's when you'll hear him referenced actually by name, if you don't hear him referenced as Hades or the, unseen one, the invisible one. It's going to be Pluton. You'll hear him referenced as Pluton or Pluto very often. And he is known for, like I said, his roles in mythology. He's got the one with Persephone. He's got the stories about his parents, and the Titanonicon. I have a hard time saying that word. I apologize, guys. So he's also referenced in that one. There's a couple myths where he's referenced with Hercules, and then I'm going to talk about it later. But there's a couple other heroes as well, and then there's a king who tries to cheat death that really pisses him off. So he does pop up, like I said, briefly, but this is where he is. It was rarely ever said, his name was rarely ever said out loud. It was considered to be dangerous. It was considered to be a very sacred thing to say and very sacred thing to use. They considered it dangerous because if you said that out loud, it would immediately invoke his presence. You'd be attached to the underworld, you're attached to death. Like, it just wasn't something that you did. Back in the day, like, that's really how he was seen. That's really how it was thought. I use his name a lot and it doesn't immediately invoke him. I'm gonna, like, personally put that out there. But it was said back in the day, upon invocation, like, the individual would actually, like, immediately be brought to Hades' house of death, which is what, his palace, his castle, his realm is referenced to in the realm of Hades, the underworld that he rules over. So that also is another thing to keep in mind when it comes to, like, why he possibly doesn't pop up in a lot of myths and a lot of stories as well, is, like, they simply didn't even want to, like, speak his name. They didn't even want to do that because they were so afraid of the power that would be invoked when they did that. Okay, I'm going to jump back into the chat just to see if there's any questions or anything that we have to talk about. Will you be talking about? No, no, Paul. I'm not going to be talking about the oracle much today. Yeah, Pluto is his Roman equivalent. Yes, Roman equivalent. Yes. I'm going to be talking. No, I'm not going to be talking about the oracle really today. I might do, like, a side little pop-up about that. I already have a lot in here, and I wish I could fit it in there. I just really want to make sure I have you guys meet him, to be honest. So no, unfortunately, probably won't be. I'm sorry if that disappoints you. Okay, does anybody have any questions before I jump back in? And can everybody hear me okay? Because, like, my volume was messed up before too, so fabulous. Okay, awesome. I'm glad, Paul. We can always talk about that on our own though. Like I know all like it's a whole thing and I love it. But we can always talk about it. Fabulous. We'll just DM about it later. Okay, so where'd my study guide go? There it is. Fabulous. Okay, so more about who he was. Hades is seen as the son of the Greek Titans Cronus and Rhea. Those are his parents. He's considered the brother to Zeus and Demeter and Hera and Hestia and Poseidon. So it's a little bit interesting because there's not quite sure like what the prophecy was. Like we don't really know what Cronus like saw and like really what the prophecy was, but his children were gonna bring around like they were gonna end his they were gonna end his reign pretty much. They're gonna take away his power, like he's no longer gonna be the ones of power, and really he actually ended up making it come true on his own. It's kind of interesting. But so when it comes to like his parents and Cronus, so Hades' father actually like he did completely like he tried to completely destroy him, kill him. He literally swallowed him. If you don't know a lot about the story of the Titans, the Titans and the Olympians, and all of this, I'm actually going to be doing a class on this at some point in like super detail to go and break this down. Otherwise, like you can definitely look into it. There's a lot of resources. I'm pretty sure we have some on the website already. If not, I'll go add some of mine so that you can start looking into this. But the whole story between the Titans and Olympians is super interesting. But Hades does have like a pretty crucial role in it. So he actually ends up with his helm of invisibility, his helm of darkness. He ends up with that weapon. There's a couple of different theories of how he ends up with it. Some of it says he gets it from a giant, another one says it's Hermes. But there's a couple different theories with that, a couple different stories with that. But he ends up with the helm, and he actually ends up being able to get like behind the lines when they're in the war with Cronus to be able, while he is invisible, to actually make the 10-year war with Cronus and Olympians end. And actually, like, he's the final victorious move. He's the reason why Zeus was able to, why the brothers were able to actually, like, win that war. And they were in war because Cronus was afraid of his children and what they were going to do to him. There's a prophecy that they were going to pretty much destroy him. So he actually takes his children, he swallows all of them. There's, except for Rhea does this whole thing. There's a couple different theories of a couple different goddesses that actually help her. But Rhea does this thing to where she pretty much switches Zeus with a rock, and Cronus ends up swallowing a rock instead of Zeus. He thinks he swallows Zeus, and then Zeus is raised in secret. And then this whole big thing happens where he ends up being able to free his siblings, and then they go to war against his father for 10 years. And then the end of this war, like I said, the three siblings, the three brothers, they end up victorious. They end up taking down their father Cronus and enslaving him in Tartarus. And they end up destroying his father's very destructive cannibalistic reign. And then those three, the three main brothers, Hades, Zeus, and Poseidon, are considered like the three masters who end up sharing command over the universe, because they're the three main ones that make the victory over the Titans possible. So that's his role within his family. That's where he sits. Also, Hades was actually technically the oldest and first one born out of them, but he was the last one that came back out of Cronus when he was after they were eaten. Like he was the last one reborn in a sense, after they were freed from Cronus. So in a sense, he's also the youngest sibling. So depending on how you look at it, I personally feel like because of that, and like not like that right there is why partially why he was like given the role that he was given. There's a couple different theories and a couple different sources on like how those roles got split up. One of it is that they literally just drew lots, and Hades, that's the lot that Hades drew, and he ended up in the underworld. Another one is that like they literally actually ended up picking, and Hades literally that's what he picked and that's what he wanted. Another theory is that if you really think about it, like Hades kind of has a lot more power than Zeus has in a way, because he does have like he's so feared they won't even say his name, like because it'll invoke him immediately. So like he's said to have more power because, and he was said to be given all that power, be given more power because of his role in the battle, and that's why he was given more technically. And he likes his solitude, he likes being on his own, he likes being in his realm. So Zeus is just really like that public face, that out and about, that like, hey, I'm king of the Olympians and that I'm Zeus, and bow down and worship me. Sorry, Zeus and I don't have a very good relationship. I'm trying not to let that seep through a little bit. So there's all of that when it comes to him and when it comes to roles. The other theory that also when it comes to him and like why he ends up in the underworld is because he's the youngest, so he's given what everybody else considers to be the least favorable, the least wanted role. To be the keeper of the underworld, to be the one that everybody they fear you, but they don't venerate you really because, they don't want to die. They don't want to be in the afterlife. They want to keep their lives. So there's that theory as well. So there's a lot of different theories. There's a lot of different philosophies when it comes to like how those roles get split up, but they get split up and Hades ends up ruler of the underworld. I personally feel like, and with my workings with him, is that like it's a combination of a couple different things. He does really like his solitude, and that makes it to where he can be in the solitude. He likes to be able to observe what's going on and be a part of things from behind, like behind the scenes. He really does like to be like that invisible veil. At the same time, he did fully understand and grasp like the amount of power he really was going to be able to have to be able to hold. There's also is my personal this is really my personal theory, my personal belief, and like with working with him and with things like that, there's this tinge of justifiable revenge, how I kind of see it with him, and why he kind of also is in the underworld and wants to be part of the ruler of the underworld, and why in my mind like he also kind of he rejoiced in it, is because like his father's there. Like his father is being held there. So like he is now the keeper of the man who tried to destroy him and all of his family and like literally ate him. So like he literally gets to be the one that decides like what's going on. Like he's in control of Tartarus. Like that is like his domain. Like he is now the one caging Cronus in rather than Cronus having caged him in. And so that's kind of I feel like that's a very big key part of it, a very big role in it, a very big that's how I feel about it. That's how I personally feel about it. That's how he comes off of to me, and like my workings with him and my studies and readings with him, both ancient and modern, and again, like my personal work with him. That's really how I feel like what's going on with that. And yeah, you can take it and digest it and see how you feel about it. I also personally feel like he's incredibly misunderstood. He's so misunderstood. People think that he's just this like very, very, hey, don't like using this word. And if you most of you been in my classes before, like evil, like people see him as very evil, this very like very, very malevolent being. And they confuse him with the god of death all the time. And so I think that's also where that fear is coming from, is like they're confusing also his role and like who he is. They're not really fully understanding that like he really does play this very passive, this very behind the scenes role. Like he very much is like, you get the justice that you get in the afterlife based on what you did in your previous life. If something needs to be fixed and I need to intervene, I will do so. But like he's very like very back, and he just and I feel like people are really missing that. He has a lot of compassion, and if you think about it, he was very, very protective of his siblings when it comes to the battle with the Titans, when it comes to battle against his parents, when it comes to all of that. He's very protective of Persephone. Like he's very, very, very connected to her, very, very in love with her. And out of most deities that I know that rule the underworld, like he is very, very laid back. Like it's not this like he's this very passive, he doesn't play this end all and be all judgment, it seems. And that's what I really, really like about him, is it gives you a lot more like compassion. It's more of like he creates this space that literally forces you like you just have to sit in the reality of like what it is that you did and who you are. Like that's really what he is. He's a very, very big like mirror, and he's this space that just encases you in this area that you can't get away from. You have to sit in it. And how that comes off to you is going to be dependent on like what your reality is and what your perspective is and what you did. And that's really like how he comes off and how we see him. And like that's really like what I'm trying to bring out and open up with him. So Sorry, I knew this was going to happen talking about him, that it might get a little bit jumpy talking about like the history and like how I view him and see him, because like I said, he's really big for me and I really, really love and adore him. So let's see, where are we at? So some other names that he's also known by, like I said, Pluton, Pluto, Hades. He's also known by, you may hear that as well. I typically say Hades. I don't know. I feel like Hades just sounds pretentious, and I just try not to do that. People apparently already find me intimidating enough, and I try not to do that. But you will also hear him referred to as that. Then you have God of the Underworld as well. You'll hear him typically referred to that. God of wealth, God of harvest. You hear him attached to God of the afterlife as well. And then, like I talked about, his realm is named after him as well. He's very much attached to being presided over funeral rites and the right to actual do burial. That's something that I really wanted to highlight. He very much wants to make sure the dead are honored and venerated with the proper respect they're supposed to be honored and venerated with. So he actually, there's a couple of stories where he pops up to the justice for the dead. But then at the same time, and the reason why I say that is because it's the rule that he has, really, to where like if you are not properly buried, like you're not gonna be allowed into the afterlife. He's really enforcing and trying to enforce that for the dead to be venerated in the way they should be venerated, and for the dead to be venerated and honored in the way they should be honored. With the proper burials, with the rites, the way they should be, the way every human soul should be. So that's something that I really, really like about him as well. Is like I feel like he really holds that to try to make sure that like humans have the justice that they need in their death and that they deserve. Let's see. Okay. We talked about his family. We've talked about some of the myths that have to do with him. Okay, I'm gonna jump in the chat just to see if you guys have any questions. Yeah, it is a really, really great read. I totally agree, Paul. The story of the Olympians is a super great read. Okay, does anybody have any questions while I'm in here? Double checking to see if you guys have any questions. What page are you on? Oh, let me check. Sunny. I've been honestly jumping around. Let's see. I'm going to be starting on page 11 here next. We're going to be jumping into more of the details of the myths and the origins and the history of him. So 11 on the study guide next we'll be jumping into. Okay. Fabulous. Okay, so I just said that. We're going to jump into more of the myths and the legends. So I really broke down, I mean, more than I wanted to, his fight with the Titans and things like that. Because like I said, I'm going to do a class on that and break that down in more detail. But like I said, he reigns over the underworld, he reigns over the dead. He's really seen, sometimes people view him more as kind of like a merciless master. I see him referenced to as frequently. They do that because he really doesn't allow any of his subjects to return to the living. He really doesn't allow that. Like there are times where attempts that are made, and there are a couple stories like we're going to talk about now, a little bit more detail here, to where they've like a couple. There was a doctor and a king who managed to be able to actually like cheat death in a way and get around death. And that did not make Hades very happy. Like you actually see his wrath pretty intensely there. Because everybody has to go through that and experience that. And he didn't enjoy the fact that like people were not coming into his realm like they should be. That made him pretty mad. He works with a lot of different types of entities and beings. You'll notice in the stories that he has demons that assist him. He has a lot of different various beings that work underneath him. For example, you have the ferryman Charon in the River of Styx, the one in the afterlife that you have to cross him over. He typically almost always is residing in the underworld. I seriously think I know of outside of the story of Persephone, and you can even argue he doesn't actually leave the underworld for that, because simply the ground opens up and she's swallowed whole by it. So really, if you really think about it, I only know of one myth where he actually leaves the underworld. And you see him on Olympus, and it has to do with Hercules. And I'll talk about that just a smidge here. But he really does reside in his realm. He really doesn't leave. Like, he really likes being in his realm. He resides there. It is said that his palace is considered to be like a more like a burial mound like palace. It's completely sheltered from sunlight because he does not like the sun. He doesn't like being in the sun. He doesn't enjoy it. And it is also said that if anybody actually crosses the great door to his palace, to gain access to his palace that way, they're never allowed to leave. I personally don't know. I have not made an attempt to enter the palace. I always meet him like in my own space. I don't go and meet him in his. I've wanted to, I've thought about doing that, but I actually have found quite a few different writings about that. But so let's see here. Sorry, needed to go on mute. So when it comes, like I said, it is literally said that if anybody crosses the actual door to his palace, that they'll never leave. And I really think this kind of comes from the Persephone story as well, even though like the pomegranate seeds are a really big deal. But I think that's part of it. He guards, in addition to being, like I've talked about before, in addition to being the guardian of the souls of the dead, he's also guardian of all the wealth that's present in the subsoil and underneath the earth. Let's see. I'm gonna skip through that because that doesn't make any sense. Why I put that there. Sometimes I go back to my study guides and like, I was really just writing. Why did I put that one there? Okay, so we're gonna talk about it. Honey, we're on page 13 now. So we're gonna talk about the fight with Hercules. We're gonna talk about the one story that I know of where he actually leaves his underworld, where he actually leaves his realm. So he, like I said, like I personally don't view the story of Persephone as him leaving his realms. It's very specific in almost every single version that literally the earth opens up and she was swallowed by it. So when it comes to this, Hercules, he has this fight with Hercules. It's in the Iliad. And it tells of the hero's descent into the underworld. And Hades had actually forbade and did not allow him access to his kingdom. He simply, like, he literally, like, met him at the door of the underworld. And he was like, nope, I'm not going to allow you access. Like, you're not going to be here. And in a couple different stories, it's thought to be a stone. Some is said to be an arrow. One is said to be a sword. But and for some reason or whichever one it is, he actually literally like throws it or jabs him, depending on which one, through the door to wound Hades. He's thinking that like as a distraction to be able to get him to leave because he needs to go get healed, so that he can actually like get into the underworld to fulfill one of his final tasks, which was that he actually needed to take Cerberus. And it's actually said that like in like literally Hades was actually wounded. Like you read that he was wounded, so he rushed off to Mount Olympus, where Peon, which is one of the healers, one of the healing gods, was there so that they could apply a balm onto him so that he could be healed. So literally, that's like literally the only time that I see a myth of where he actually leaves is that myth right there. And he's barely mentioned. It's this small little thing. It's a small little blip, and that's it. He's really not mentioned like much of the times of ever leaving his realm. That's it. It's right there. Otherwise, he's typically always in his realm. So I'm gonna jump into a couple other things here to go into. Okay, so honey, I'm going down to page 20 because some more of his myths have to do with visitors actually in the underworld. I'm going to talk about these myths and then we're going to go talk about his actual realm. What it looks like, the descriptions of it, how to get there. But so if you jump to page 20 now in the study guide, that's where we'll be to now talk about the rest of the myths because they have to do with visitors actually to the underworld. And then some of his lovers because he is more faithful than any other Greek god out there. He puts Zeus to shame, but he is not 100% faithful to Persephone. He does have a couple lovers out there. He even has possibly some children outside of wedlock from Persephone, because there are a couple of theories and a couple of mentions that the theories are actually all his children. So there are a couple of theories and thoughts and things that have to do with that. But okay, so some other myths where you'll hear him and you'll see him brought up is actually has to do with the hero Orpheus. So there is one story where he had to descend in the underworld in search of his late wife, Eurydice. She had died of a snake bite. She was super, super lovely at music. And he was super, super, super talented musician. So he played some music to be able to charm Hades. And Persephone was there as well. And some people think that Persephone was more the reason of why this happened. Some people, think it was Hades, but the music charmed, either one of them or both of them so much, that he actually allowed, Eurydice to be able to go back to the land of the living, as long as, they did not look back on the way out. And so that was, one story of the dream. Story
Come here, baby. Come on.
Okay, so in another story, there is Theseus and Persephone. They actually pledged to kidnap and marry daughters of Zeus. They were both thought they were both kings. Theseus actually chose Helen, and together the two of them actually went and they kidnapped her. They decided to hold her until she was old enough to marry, and then Perseus chose Persephone. Um, bad choice on his part. So they left Helen with Theseus's mother, Aretha, and then the two of them traveled to the underworld. Hades had known about their plan prior to that and had found out about their plan to come and try to capture his beloved wife. So he actually pretended to offer them hospitality. Like he set out a feast for them. Like he laid it out. Like they were being welcomed. And as soon as the pair sat down, he actually snakes coiled around their feet, held them there, and they were held there captive. Eventually, Theseus was rescued by Hercules, but Perseus was remained trapped as a punishment. Because remember, he's the one that pledged to kidnap Persephone. Like he's not the one that chose Helen. He's the one that chose to kidnap Persephone. He's actually seen to remain there till all time trapped and continuously punished. Like he is one. He is literally one of the few stories that you hear of to where the one of the souls Hades pays great attention to. Like this is one where he's like, no, you tried to come for my wife, F this, no, I'm tormenting you to the end of time. Like she is my everything. Like, no, you're not doing this. But you actually this is one soul, he actually pays quite a bit of attention to. Which is pretty interesting. So there is another story that has to do with a mortal king. Sisyphus, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it very well. Sisyphus, it's Sisyphus. He was a king of Corinth. He actually ends up being punished in Tartarus for revealing the river of the god Osyps to the whereabouts of his daughter. And he revealed it to her after Zeus actually had abducted her, and that's a whole other thing. And he literally was trying to cheat death as well. That's something that he was very, very he was very much trying to do. And he was trying to do that by gaining access to the river of the god Asopus. Zeus became incredibly angry at him for revealing the secret. And he was Zeus was super, super pissed. And so he actually sent Thanatos to collect him. He literally sent him, was like, hey, you need to no, you need to cast, the bonds of death on him. You need to do this. But Sisyphus has actually found a clever way to be able to cast death into his own bonds. So he really actually bound Thanatos. And as a result, no one could die until he was, free, until Ares freed him so that he could actually be delivered. So souls could actually be delivered. So this whole big thing happened, this whole big argument happened, and Sisyphus actually was like ordering, his wife to perform funeral rites for him so that, the gods would actually, think that he was actually dead and be brought before Hades. And, so he was doing like these fake funeral rites. He was doing all these fake rituals. He was trying to literally actually like fake his death. Um, and Hades learned of this. He learned about all of this. And he was really, really mad. Like, he was really, really angry. For one, he's like, you're making a mockery of the funeral rites. You're making a mockery of the funeral rituals. You're making a mockery of me. And he was very, very angry at the fact that, like, people were not dying that were supposed to be dying. He was mad that, Thanatos was being, held bound and wasn't able to perform his duties and keep bringing people into his realm and into his underworld so he can fulfill his duties. And there is just creating this imbalance as well, like in the souls and in the multiverse and the universe. And there's just like this caused like a lot of things. Like there's a lot of reasons for this to be an issue. So he actually ends up punishing him. So when Hades learns of this, he actually allows him, Sisyphus, to return to the world of the living so that he can punish the wife for doing all of this. And he thinks that he's going to be able to return afterwards. But he never allows him. He makes him die of old age. And then Hades punishes him in the underworld by making him have to roll a boulder up on top of a hill over and over and over and over again. Like he literally, like that's the punishment that he's literally decided to give him. He's literally gonna sit here and move this boulder up this giant hill over and over and over again. Every time he gets to the top, it's gonna fall, it's gonna roll right back down, and he has to start back over. Like he literally decided, like, nope, you thought that you could cheat death. You thought that you couldn't, like you weren't able, like you weren't gonna have to fulfill your cycle. You went through all of this. You were so disrespectful to so many souls, so many funeral rites, so many things. You tried to blame the punish, like you tried to sit here and put this back onto your wife and like have her be punished for it instead of you. Like, no, you're gonna know what it feels like to like have this never-ending thing happen because of the decision that you made. And like honestly, like that would be that I would not enjoy. I wouldn't enjoy that punishment at all, personally. Like I would not like it at all. Another time that you see him popping up in some myths that has to do with heroes is Hercules again. So Hercules' final labor was to actually capture Cerberus. So he first actually went to Elysius to try to be initiated into the Elysian. I have a really hard time saying that word, so bear with me. It's Eleusinan, the Eleusinian mysteries. But he wasn't able to do that. I apologize. He was able to do that. I so apologize. I was thinking of something else for a second. So he went to go actually be initiated into the mysteries. He did that because he was trying to absolve his guilt for killing centaurs, which is a whole other thing. There's Hercules he has so many stories that has to do with him. He actually, while doing this, he learned how to enter and exit the underworld while alive. He ended up finding the entrance to the underworld. Athena and Hermes actually help him through there as well, through the almost like this backside like entrance, to try to get to Cerberus, to try to get behind Hades. He ends up like actually to the back of Hades, and he simply actually just ends up deciding to ask for Hades' permission to take Cerberus. And Hades actually agrees to allow him to do that as long as he never causes like harm to Cerberus. So that was like his one condition with that. I like this story too because it talks like it shows him like it shows him in a way to where like there's so few writings about him, and it's not like he wasn't unreasonable. He's like, okay, this is your final labor, this is like the last thing that you have to do, like you've done like all of these other things. I mean, as long as you don't harm my dog, I suppose you can take it. Like as long as you don't harm as long as you don't harm my best friend, as long as you don't harm my companion, like he was all I had for a super long time before Persephone came along. So as long as like you're respectful to him, you don't harm him, like fine, like you can take him and you can do this. So the next story we're gonna get into, actually, let me just jump in the chat here. I'm gonna see if you guys have any questions. Okay, so I don't know the history of cremation, but is there any information about how Hades feels about cremation? Morgan, I'm actually gonna have to get back to you on that. To be perfectly honest, I don't think that there's an issue with it personally, but I don't know if I've ever really examined that when it comes to like his worship and his veneration. I think I'd have to look at like very specifically culturally, like in Greece, like what was the culture, like culturally, anthropology, like what were they doing for funeral rites, like specifically on cremation at that time, and how they felt about it, because I feel like that would be the closest answer to that question. But I feel like I don't feel like there would be that much of an issue with it, but I'm gonna get back to you on that one. Morgan, I'm gonna get back to you on that one. Go ahead, Annie.
Um, my brain's not fully braining today, so I may be off, but if I remember right, there were quite a few funeral fires in Greek culture, so if they're willing to burn their dead, I would think cremation would be fine.
That's
Just
kind of
my
what my
input.
mind's, yeah, that's what my mind's thinking too. That's why I don't think it's like, that's also, yeah, that's why my mind's thinking that too, is because I really don't think it'd be an issue. Thank you, honey. Okay, let's see. I don't see anything else. Okay, let's see. Where am I at? Okay, we're at the most commonly known myth that everybody knows about Hades, the very complex love story of Hades and Persephone. Okay, guys, I'm gonna do my very, very, very best to not run away with this because like I said, I went in super detail on the story in the Persephone class that I did. But like I said, I adore these two so much. It may be a little bit hard for me not to run away with this. I will do my very best. And also, if you didn't see my Persephone class, haven't seen my Persephone class, you're going to get this the first time you're going to hear it. So I want to talk about it as well, just for that. And it might come out a little different this time than the first time too, because it's ever changing for me and my connection with them. Because I deeply love them. I don't know if it comes across as like as much as I feel it, but like it is a very deep veneration that I have for them. And connect, like I love them. Okay, so I'm gonna tell two different versions. I'm gonna tell the most known condensed version of the kidnapping of Persephone. In the Persephone class, I break down every single variation of this story. So if you want to know every single variation there is, because there's multiple variations of this story, like specifically, I'm going to do the most condensed down, the most popular known version right now. Then I'm going to give you my version of this story, my interpretation of this story, based on my work with them, my interpretation of them, and all of that fun stuff. So in Greek mythology, Persephone was a daughter of Demeter, the goddess of grain and fertility, and the daughter of Zeus. She was conceived before Zeus was married to Hera, so that's why apparently it's not an issue, even though I don't think so, because no, Hera has crazy jealousy issues. I mean, she should though. I mean, she should. So Persephone, apparently, she lived as a very happy, idyllic childhood. According to most myths, a lot of times she was seen playing with Athena and Aphrodite and Artemis, and with the nymphs. And a lot of times she was in the nymphs and in some in a lot of the wooded forest areas. She loved being in the fields of flowers. Before she even met Hades, she actually didn't even have a name. She was just called Korai, which was the young maiden. She becomes Persephone actually after their marriage is consummated. But that again, that's a whole other thing. But however, things started to change when she was a little bit older. There's a couple different versions to this story, but when she becomes more of like a teenager, which is kind of when the story takes place, they're very specific in every version though. She was of age to be wed, like she had her first bleed, like so that's how they view that. So in their mind, she was a woman. She was a young maiden. She was at that age and that time. But it would be during her teenage years. She was out in a meadow picking narcissa flowers. I say that specifically because it actually is a correspondence to Hades. You can actually use that as an offering or as a tool for summoning with him. But she was out in the meadow picking narcissa flowers when literally, like quite literally, the earth literally opened up and swallowed her whole. And it was Hades coming to kidnap her. So according to many myths and many different versions of it, Hades had been watching her for a time. He was lonely. He thought she was super beautiful. He wanted to marry her. He had gone to Zeus to actually try to bargain a few times to be able to marry her. And Zeus is like, there is no way the overbearing Demeter who like clings to her daughter is ever gonna let that happen. So no, like, no, I'm not gonna try and bargain with you. Like, no. And he just outright like denied Hades. So then Hades was like, fine, like I'm a god in my own right. I'm just gonna take her. So that like with this version of the story, that's what it is. And when this happened, Demeter, Persephone's mother, which she was known as, the goddess of harvest and fertility and grain, and she was the reason why everybody had food on the planet and why, everything grew and bloomed. And so she literally was super, 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 super devastated. She searched the entire earth, wandering for quite a long time, but could never find her daughter, didn't know where she was. And because she was wandering around aimlessly looking and super depressed, and actually quite a few, there's a couple myths of some things that she was doing during this time. Eventually, I'm going to do a class on her too, and I'll break that down. But during, she was doing all this stuff on Earth. She wasn't attending to her duties, so nothing was growing. Earth became barren. Humanity started to die off. People weren't honoring the gods. And Zeus was like, well, shit. I need to do something about this. I can't let this keep going on. So I need to intervene. So he brokers a deal between Demeter and Hades. May I add, like in almost every single version, like Persephone has no say. Like she's not a part of any of these negotiations, which I hate. Because that's really that's not who she is. But so that's a whole other thing. Again, in my class with her. But so they make this bargain, they make this deal, they make this negotiation that Demeter agrees that she'll go back to her duties. Oh yeah, by the way, Demeter doesn't even find out like through Zeus that that Persephone is there. Demeter finds out there's a couple different versions. Hecate is one of them. Another one is one of the water nymphs, but like she's like Zeus doesn't even tell her. Demeter actually is like super, super pissed. There's a couple stories where she actually threatens to continue to hold the earth hostage and to not let any crops grow and to continue to make like winter like perpetual. So that's another reason why Zeus steps in. Because there's that threat looming there too, that like it's also like she's threatening and it's not gonna stop. So they strike the deal that Persephone, in some versions, she's gonna spend 2/3 of the year with Demeter and 1/3 with Hades. In other versions, it's 1/2 the year with Demeter and 1/2 the year with Hades. So that's also why we have the changing of the seasons. So when Persephone gets to spend her time with her beloved husband, that is when we are in winter. That is when Demeter is like not letting things grow. And when Persephone is up with her mother and spending time with her mother, that is when things are growing and blossoming, and that's when spring. So that's why those 2 times a year are actually super sacred to both Hades and Persephone. The Samhain, when she descends, is way more sacred because she's coming back and returning to him. But you have to also honor like when she's going to be leaving him and when they're going to be apart. You have to honor like the depth of that like sorrow, the depth of that like disconnection, like that those two won't physically be having. But then you also honor, the blooming of everything here for you. So it's an interesting time. Honestly, like spring's a super interesting time for me when it comes to like reflection because of that. Because like there's a lot of grief mixed into that with that joy of like growth and coming forth. Which is also why I always have a rough time this time of year. But that's a side note. Okay, so that's the rundown of the story, the kidnapping of, Persephone and Hades. Now, Oh, also they say in most of them that he rapes her when he kidnaps her, that the consummation of the marriage isn't consensual. There is a couple different versions of that though, so you have to pick and choose which one. My version, how I feel about this, how I feel about it, how I feel the story comes off, and I also like am excited too because I'm talking about this I'm going to be able to focus a little bit more on Hades and like his perspective of their relationship and like what Persephone fulfills for him. And in my class of Persephone, I really got to talk about what Hades fulfills with her and what that relationship fulfills for her. So I really see this story as a very primordial being, a very primordial like essence and energy coming back together and connecting together. Um, for one, like if you look at who Persephone is and what she represents from a zodiac astrological perspective, and like what um Hades represents, like Hades is, Pluto, the emotions, like he's very much the emotions, the unseen, the subconscious, like that's where he is. And Persephone is very much like she's that maiden, that Virgo energy, like that analytics, but like still nurturing and caring, and like she's able to wrap up that loner energy and just like hold it in this very productive space so those emotions can be felt. It's like that energy that comes together, that cosmic energy, this very primordial energy, like these two were bound to like come together. Like there was no way around it, for one. Like I don't see any other way around it. But it's this on top of that. Persephone in her own right should have been given more power from the very, very beginning. She was given such low, like for who she was and who her parents were, and like she was no, like she should have been higher above Apollo and Artemis, and she wasn't. She was given such low status. And so what I really think and what I really feel it happened is that I don't feel like it was this kidnapping. I feel like she very much willingly went when, or even if like he did take her, and I also feel like that is part of it. I feel like both of them had these plans going on because they both had these desires and these emotions, and it just synchronicity happened, and it happened at the same time that created this absolute explosion of a love story. And with this synchronicity at the same time, like it to me, Persephone was looking for more power. She wanted to get her status. She wanted to be able to be held and venerated at the point that she needed to be held and venerated at. Her mother was already taking over Earth. Why not find another realm that she could run and be control of? Why not rule the realm of the dead? In some rights, she did have power and entity, like access over the earth, but she didn't get a lot of power over the earthly realm until after this story happened, until after her union with Hades, until after that negotiation happened. She didn't have domain over the planet of over Earth. She was simply Demeter's daughter, that she was literally tugging around places. So then she gets so much power after this story. She becomes queen of the underworld, realm of the dead, like keeper of the dead as well, alongside of her husband. She starts to rule over the earth. She starts to rule over seasons. And like she literally, if you think about it, like humans like absolutely rejoice when she comes back to earth. That's when everything starts to happen for them. That's when things bloom and blossom and creativity. That's when life starts to happen. That's, babies are born, like all of that. Like she has so much power over that. And I feel like that's really what she was going after. Hades, on the other hand, I feel like he absolutely loved his solitude. Don't get me wrong, he absolutely loved his solitude. He very much loves being in his realm, his space. He loves the fact that like he gets to carry out justice over their father for what they did to him. Like he gets to be who he is in his realm. He gets to be completely feared and venerated and respected to the point where people won't even say his name. He has immense amount of power, but you can still get lonely and you can still want companionship and you can still want that connection. You still need that, like even a god, even like the absolute divine masculine, the source of divine masculine energy, like one of the closest ways you can get to that source, because like, I don't think gods are the highest entity that there is, but one of the closest ways you can get to that source and to get the divine masculine, like they still need to be balanced out in the divine feminine. And all that solitude and not even really interacting with his own siblings much and the rest of the pantheon very much, like that takes a toll on you and you're gonna want that. And so like I feel like he really, really was like he really truly deeply was in love with her before he took her. I don't think this was like this creepy like kidnap, rape. Like I just like I don't feel like it was like this sexual thing like Zeus does all over the place. I do feel like this was a deep, deep seated connection that these two had that like, and that's why he brought her down there. I think he also knew that she wanted that power and he wanted to be able to provide that for her. He wanted to be able to be like build her up. Like if you think the connection that these two have, like she is so worshipped by him. Like, and I can't even like emphasize worshipped enough. Like if you want to connect to Hades, like you have to honor his wife. I'm gonna like if I didn't say that already when I'm like, and I'm gonna express it later when we talk about how to honor him in a little bit. But like you have to honor his wife. Like you have to honor, connect to her in some way, shape, or form because she's so important to him. Like she's that light. Like when you think about the image of her, she was frolicking through fields with nymphs and playing in the water and just like running around with Artemis and Athena and Aphrodite. And like that's how a lot of the stories of her are painted before the two of them, their story. And so like she is this carefree, this wild, this carefree, this bright, this sunshiny energy to bring to her, to bring to him. But she also has to have really bright, fiery, and that divine feminine. Um, so I really feel like that those two things were happening, which brought them together, which then once they were together, for one, I don't think Persephone expected to fall so madly in love with him. I really don't. I don't think that that was intentional, but it did and it happened. And how connected these two are and how much like they hold each other up and venerate, like hold each other up and support each other and like respect each other and like hold each other in their places. Like it is very, very intense and it is the epitome of duality as well, and is the epitome of give and take within a relationship, and also how like you can be two completely different people at the same time, uh, completely two different people while also being the same person at the same time. Because Persephone, like I said, she's that image of like that spring, that frolicking through the meadow of flowers and playing in the water with the water nymphs and like this whole dreamy, like arrowy, like the sense about her. And then you have this dark underworld, death, you know, solitude energy when it comes to Hades. And they just like that duality, like they just attract to be held in each other. But almost always when you also see her, she's by herself. So she also likes that solitude and she likes being on her own. It's just this different, it's just beautiful blending between the two of them. Okay, so I think I ranted on enough about that. So let me jump in the chat and I'll talk about some of his infidelities. And then we can talk about how to worship and honor him and some of his correspondence and epitaphs. And then I can call him in for you. I'm trying to make sure I don't make this go way too long. Okay, any questions, any comments, anything at all that anybody has to say or ask or anything like that? And if you disagree with me, you can totally disagree with me too. That's definitely a thing. Okay, I don't see any thumbs up or hands raised. I'll give it a couple more seconds to see if anybody puts anything in the chat. Okay, well, let's talk about his lovers. Okay, I hate saying that. It's so weird, but he did have a couple. And one of them is the reason why you have the herb mint, by the way. So one of them is actually not quite sure how to pronounce it. I've never actually heard it pronounced, so I'm gonna just bear with me. Luise, Leuce. She was known as actually the most beautiful nymphs and the daughter of Oceanus. Hades fell in love with her. He kidnapped her to the underworld. She lived out a span of her life in his realm. When she died, the god he actually sought to like console himself by making sure that there was a very suitable memorial of their love, actually within his realm. So in the Elysian fields, which is where the honorable in the afterlife go, and where the pious spend their afterlife. He actually planted a white tree and like brought this white tree into existence in order to honor her and their relationship and like who she was to him. This is also the tree that Hercules actually crowns himself to celebrate his return from the underworld with. So it pops up there as well. Oh, did I not break down the underworld yet? I don't think I did. I skipped that. Okay, I'll have to jump back and really quickly, please. Okay, so the next lover that he had is actually Nymph, which she was a nymph of the river Cocytus, Cocytus. She actually does become Hades' mistress, and this is when Persephone is actually in the picture. The previous one was before Persephone was in the picture, but Persephone is actually his wife and they're married at this point. And so this actually, she's actually Hades' mistress. Like he actually really loved her a lot. And Persephone found out about it. She got incredibly jealous, like super jealous, like went into a rage jealous about it. To be perfectly honest, I'd do the same thing. And she literally went and she trampled the nymph over and over again underneath her foot and transformed her into the garden plant mint in the process of doing so. In another story, it actually says that Hades turned her into the mint plant in order to honor her. After she was dead, and then Persephone found that mint herb and tore her into pieces because she was so upset about it. In another version, it is also said that Hades actually kept Mint as his mistress before he married Persephone, and then set her aside after he married Persephone. And then because he did that, Mint was running around boasting about being more beautiful than Persephone and how she was better than Persephone and she was the true queen of the underworld. And that Hades would soon take Mint back and lead Persephone to the side. And in absolute anger about this, it was actually Demeter who, in protection of her daughter, trampled Mint and turned her into the mint plant. So there's a couple different versions, but all of them agree that she was Hades' mistress. Persephone found out about it. She was pissed, and her punishment was she was turned into the plant Mint. There is one other lover that's referenced and brought up, but I don't really like have any stories about her. It's really like all that it really is there's Theophile, which she was a girl who claimed that Hades loved her and that she was better than Persephone. Like she was actually like a mortal woman who was literally running around claiming this. Which yeah, not cool. Not cool to do that. Okay, so let me jump back up here actually, because I totally forgot to do this. So we're gonna jump back into the underworld really, really quick. So the underworld, what it actually is like. So it is referenced as the term Hades. It is called Hades. That is the kingdom of the dead over which the god Hades rules. It welcomes the souls of all dead there, except for those who are not buried, which I talked about before. And those who are not buried are actually forced to wander without any type of peace for eternity. And they're also outside of the realm of afterlife and they're outside the realm of reality. And they're in kind of like this shades are a very interesting concept. That's a whole other thing. But they're doomed to be shades. In any case, it's really like it sucks for most people. But it's super, super important that, you know, if they don't receive their burial right away, that you do actually end up providing the burial for them. So that's why, like, back in ancient times, like, if you came across a body, like, it was customary that, like, you gave them the proper burial rights. You buried them so that they wouldn't have to be ashamed. And then once they enter Hades and they are within the realm, they are not allowed to leave. They are not allowed to leave. They are there, and they are actually then judged and scrutinized based on what they did and what they did on Earth. A couple different theories on that. The Odyssey has a couple different versions of that. The Iliad has a couple different versions of that as well. But For the most part, it's really the realm itself that kind of judges you. Like Hades is pretty passive about it. Like, and he doesn't really partake in like punishment. He really actually sends the Furies to do most of it. And the Furies do most of the punishment when it comes to that, And then yeah. So the souls of the virtuous actually enter the Elysian fields. They're also known as the Fortunate Islands in some sources. And then those who were considered like wicked or, I hate this word, but evil, they're relegated to Tartarus. And then typically within Tartarus, you're subjected to atrocious and eternal torments. It's all going to be different based on you. And like I said, most of the times, like Hades sends the Furies to be a part of it. I really only have references of him like having things to do with Cronus. And then the two that I talked about earlier, Sisyphus and I can't pronounce it. Oh, the king who tried to cheat death and trapped Thanatos and like bound him. That is one soul that he pays pretty good attention to, and then the other king who tried to steal and abduct Persephone for himself. But typically he sends the Furies to deal with it and do most of it. Um, and then according to Virgil, in Hades, there are actually like two other areas as well. There's the cry fields, and that's where the souls of those who suffered for love are found. And then there's also a section that's reserved for all good warriors who died in a war, and they were honored with funeral rites and burials. The entrance to the underworld, there's a couple different versions of it. Some say that it's you can be entered through a cave in one specific area in Mount Etna in Sicily. Another says that, and some other sources say that it's inside of the Cronus caves near Athens, off the coast of Greece. And then there are some others that say that it was near, why am I trying to blank on this one? I cannot say it. Man, I'm really struggling with pronouncing words today. But near the temple for the oracles of the dead. And then there's also one that says that you actually have to cross the sea, and it can only be reached across the sea by the tip of Peloponnes, Peloponnes. So there's a couple different places around the earth where they think that where it is, but the entrance is said to be guarded by Cerberus. And then you are transported and carried across the river Styx by the ferryman Charon. Hades' role in the underworld, like I talked about before, like he's really seen as being very, very passive. Most of those tasks, like I said, for torture and punishment for the guilty are assigned to the Furies, which are thought to be his children. We're not 100% sure on that though, because there's a couple of different sources. And yeah. He is really about maintaining balance within the other world. He's really depicted as being very stoic. Some people say cold and stern, but he doesn't come off as cold and stern. It's just very more like reserved and stoic. And it is said that like his house of Hades, which is considered the palace, that it's always full of guests. So there's always guests around his palace and in his palace, but like I said, once they enter it, they typically won't be able to leave again. Okay, so we're gonna go into how to worship and honor him and correspondences and things like that, and ways to know if he's calling to you. I'm gonna jump back in here quick. Do you guys have any questions about the underworld, Hades itself, or any of his lover stories? This is probably the most you ever heard of Hades in one spot. If you look anywhere else on YouTube, I think the longest video I found is like 11 minutes. That's how little people know about him.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. With Hades, and you kind of mentioned this, his power.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Don't think I'm an oddball or crazy here.
I would never.
Others would. Um, Gold and obsidian versus dark stone.
hmm
Which school of thought do you go down?
I
Because from
love
what I've
the
read,
obsidian.
there are several different versions. One is it's gold, it's obsidian, it's beautiful, it's stunning, it's precious metals, and other is it's gloom, doom, and dark stone.
So I love the obsidian and gold. For me personally, that's how I view it. That's how I connect to it. And that's like the power that comes off of that and just like obsidian itself. Like, oh, that I also find a great connection with smoky quartz too, though. Other than that, none of the other dark stones do I prefer. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, because contrary to, I've always associated Hades with minerals. So to me, that definitely plays more in. I mean, I know it's the underworld, but only through death and love do you get life and rebirth. So,
Yep.
that's a harmonious balance there. So, okay, I just wanted to see which school of thought you went down personally, because Hades is not something I discuss very often with people.
Yeah, no,
And
definitely the obsidian. I totally agree with you though.
but I was just curious as to your specific take. Thank
Yep.
you.
I love that it's the same though. Love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, no, I definitely like I don't see it doom and gloom at all. At all. At all. Okay, honey, go ahead.
I was just curious if at some point you may touch on Cerberus, like have well, like he'd be part of a class, like a topic in it or something.
I can do that. I can add it to my list.
Okay.
I can add it to my list. I know, I mean, he can be a whole topic on his own. Easily.
Okay, cool. I
Oh no, I can do that for sure.
awesome. I didn't know because I think it'd be interesting to hear about like I don't want to call them pets, but like all the animals that are precious to different gods and goddesses and that. It'd be fascinating to see how the different cultures and different gods react to different animals and particularly their own.
I mean, there is actually a decent amount of deities that have their own. Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, okay, no, that makes sense. Good idea, honey. Good idea, honey.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's see here. Okay, this last
If
one.
I could just make one last comment on,
Go ahead.
gee, like you weren't expecting that.
It
Um,
wasn't.
Honey, you may want to look into Mayan, Inca, and Egyptian gods on that one as well, especially if you're looking for association with animals.
Okay. Maya, Incan, and Egyptian, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
A lot of
All right.
kami too from Shintoism will have attachment to animals too.
Yes.
A lot of kami have a lot of attachment to animals.
Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so let's touch into like the worship. Let's get into that. Let's get into that so I can have you guys meet him and I don't make this take up like so much of your day. So when it comes to knowing if Hades is calling to you, I'm going to be perfectly honest. He's a lot more subtle than any other deity I've ever worked with. He does not get like very in your face. Like it's not like that with him. It's pretty subtle. And so you kind of have to pay attention and you kind of have to do the shadow work to know like if he's specifically reaching out to you. And again, remember, you can work with any deity, like they don't have to specifically reach out to you. Like you can make that connection, you can make that first. Like you can always make the first move. And if you are like watching this replay and you need help on like basic deity work, I did do a class on that. I have a study guide on that, and so you can always message me and we can go into that. Oh, I'm also offering services now on how to do that on your own too, if you want one-on-one help. So you can always like check out my website too. I didn't even mean to put a plug in, but I guess I did. I just did. So modpodgemistic.com. You can always do that too. I'm always booking stuff to do that now. So okay, so when it comes to, like I said, he's pretty subtle. So stuff that you want to pay attention to, if you have repressed memories or really heightened emotional, like I mean a very big spike in your heightened emotional reactions or in your physical awareness of those around you, that's almost always one of the first signs that I feel to where Hades is coming to me and making himself known and that he's around. And I did not reach out to him first. So if he's coming to me, this is one of the first things that this is one of the very, 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 very first things I realize. I start to ruminate. There are memories that start to come up that I feel like I have dealt with I've dealt with pretty well. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, like I start ruminating about it. I start having some PTSD issues. My emotions get very, very, very heightened, especially like my loneliness, my isolation, my desire to do that, and also feeling that from other people. It gets incredibly heightened. And then I'm also very, very physically aware of like everything around me, like hyper aware of my own body, other people's bodies, my environment. Like I become very physically aware of the things around me. Um, the reason for this is because Hades has his ability to activate a lot of your clairs, a lot of your psychic abilities. He has that ability to really completely awaken that for you with his attachment to Pluto, with his attachment to the emotions, with his attachment to the psyche, with his attachment to your subconscious, like all of that he's attached to, like it can really flood and overwhelm you. Sometimes like it's literally like I start to excessively sweat. I'll start to physically feel really cold, maybe even sometimes. I will like out of nowhere, like my hairs will start to stand up, and I literally will just start to ruminate. It will literally come out of nowhere. And I have to just sit there and notice and pay attention, like, okay, this isn't me. There's nothing like I have to go through and do like my DBT skills and like have awareness of like, do I have vulnerabilities that cause this to happen? Like mentally, like, is this actually a mental thing? Like, was there an event that caused this to happen? Was there a person? Or is this my deity coming to let me know that like he has a message for me. B, like, we're just going to be hanging out. Like, C, I need to be doing some shadow work or, anything else. Like, he's with me a lot when I do collective unconscious work as well. So that also I feel him very often when like that needs to happen. But like, I feel that a lot. And then it's this mix of hot and cold as well. Because you feel cold, but then like you get like almost like the sweats from like also being like hot. It's almost like the cold sweats because he's not a cold deity or a cold entity, but like the energy space he creates can almost like be kind of like cold because of the stoicism and because of the stillness of it. Because he really forces that stillness to sit in the reality of like your emotions, your reality, your perspective, like what you did, all of that, and like how your role in it. And then like those repressed emotions, like that coming up, it can be kind of cold, but then it really opens up your heart center with those emotions. And it really opens up like with that trauma, with all that being activated and almost unintentionally sometimes because of just the power and magnitude of that space he creates. Like that's why you kind of have that like cold, hot sweat thing going on because that heart chakra opens up and you get that warmth, that emotions, and like that overpowering of that at that same time. And then you get that deep like subconsciousness and darkness that's coming through with him representing like the underworld and him being really the ruler of that. So it really opens up that heart space for that really, really magnificent healing to allow you to like forget that like you don't need to be like, to allow you to let go of like shame and guilt. Like he really, really helps with shame and guilt, like really helps with shame and guilt. Another reason, like a sign that you can see that he's possibly reaching out to you and wanting to work with you, is finding money or winning unexpected money. He loves coins, and he loves, like, he's the god of hidden wealth. Like, he's the god of all the wealth that's in the subsoil of the earth, like all the prosperity that's underneath the earth and in the subsoils of the earth. So like he's really all about that hidden wealth, and he's all about that hidden prosperity. He's all about that coming up and out of the soil for you. So if you're randomly finding money places, if you decide to just like go buy a random lotto ticket and you win, or if people start giving you random money, or you get good deals at stores, or gifts from people, that's a sign as well. If you start to become super hyper fixated on death, the afterlife, or necromancy. I don't think I need to elaborate really any more on that. It makes perfect sense. If you're hyperfixated on death, the afterlife, and necromancy, it makes perfect sense that the god of the underworld would possibly be reaching out to you. And this comes in many different ways, whether it's like being through grief, whether it's through, you working through grief, whether it's people around you working through grief, whether it's you working with your own realization of your own beliefs of the afterlife, whether it's you working with your ancestors, honoring those that have passed, anything like that that you're super, super hyper fixated on. Self-isolation and solitude. Yeah. When I really, really self-isolate, when I really, really shut down, like a lot of times he's either the cause of it, or he realizes, like, or it had already started happening, and then he's there like to hold me in that space, and it just gets magnified. So if you find yourself really self-isolating, and it's getting really, really hard for you to like want to be around people and to be able to do things that like you even are excited about or love to do, he could be around a lot of times as well, though, like not in a bad way, also in a positive way. I don't like using bad, but in like more of like a positive spin, like a lot of solitary practitioners gravitate towards Hades because they like to practice on their own. They like their magic to be their own. And he likes to sit in that space as well. And they like to keep their beliefs to themselves and be like mostly private with that. So a lot of solitary practitioners. And I think that's a huge reason too, also why I gravitated towards him at first too. It's like I've been solitary for a really long time. And for a lot of reasons, but I think that's a big reason too why I also became so attracted to him. Let's see. Okay, so those are some signs that he's possibly reaching out to you. So when it comes to like signs, symbols, and correspondences that have to do with him and attached to him, you can use horses and chariots. You can use dogs, even especially like the three-headed dog Cerberus. So if you can, have symbols or statues or images of him specifically. Keys, because they represent the mysteries of the underworld. Almost any deity that has to do with the underworld will have a key attached to it. FYI. And also for him having, the authority over the containment of the dead and the keepers of souls. You have a bident, which is actually what you see in a lot of artwork that you have with him, a lot of his statues. It's instead of a trident, it's literally like that. It's a pitchfork, but it has those two tongs on it. And he is almost always depicted as having a bident, as a power of authority, and as the power to rule over the underworld. Like that scene is like his power and authority, and to control the spiritual and material worlds. Another symbol is the helm of darkness, or the cap of invisibility. You see it often in a lot of his imagery. You also have the narcissa flower, which is believed to be the only flower that's able to bloom in the underworld, because of its association to Persephone, and it's also associated with being tied to mourning and grief and the afterlife. Cypress, which is often depicted at the entrance of the other world. It's often depicted as being planted near grave sites and as cemeteries. So cypress represents an internal afterlife. It's believed that the souls of the dead would pass through the roots of a cypress tree to enter the realms of Hades in some stories. So it's not only this tree that's associated with death, but it's also associated to be used for safety as well. And then some other things that other associations that you can have attached to him, for stones and gemstones, obsidian, like Paul and I were talking about, it's one of my favorites. I've used gold with him as well for color. That's one of the colors that I really like to use. Use black as well, but gold I like to use for him. I like smoky quartz for crystals and gemstones when it comes to him. And then other people, and a lot of people like to use onyx, black tourmaline, and any other of those black stones. For incense, you can use, if you use sage, you can use sage, frankincense, myrrh. I also like dragon's blood as well. It seems to work really well with connection for him as well. For food and drinks, he likes red wine. He loves red wine. You can also use olive oil, honey, milk, pomegranates to connect with the story between Persephone as well. You can use mint as well. I am going to put an asterisk with that though. I only use mint when I am working with Hades one-on-one. I do not use mint if I'm going to have Persephone involved. That is just a slap in the face. Just don't do that. It is your practice and you can do what you want to do, but I'm telling you from personal experience and like from how the story and how I feel about it, like try not to put those two together. Like I said, I will use mint with Hades because like he actually did very much love her. But only when Persephone is not going to be involved. The tarot card that can be attached to him for correspondence is going to be death. Other images that you'll see attached to him, other things that you can use are going to be skulls. You can use any bones from dead animals, any jewelry, anything that has to do that will be connected to one of your loved ones who has passed away or anybody that's close to you that has died. You can do snakes. Snake skin that attaches to one of the myths that has to do with him. You can do rocks and boulders as well, bones, owl feathers, feathers of owls. You can do dogs and Cerberus, and then coins. Coins. That is a huge one. Huge one to give for a symbol and an offering, an epithet, because you need a fair to give to Charon, to get to Hades, to get to the underworld. So Hades loves it when you leave coins because those are given to the souls of the dead so that they have their fare to get across the river to the underworld, to get across the river to Hades. So that is huge. And then you can also use crowns as well because he is like seen as a king and, ruler of the underworld. Some epithets that you can use with him as well for symbols and correspondences are going to be, like I talked about, Pluto, Pluton, you have Adonis, Clemus, Hades, Cynthius, god of the earth, god of the underworld, god of realm, unseen, the invisible one, the most renowned one. He's got a lot. He has got a lot of epithets. So you can look into those in the study guide to see which ones work for you, and which ones called you to use with him. When it comes to his energy and like his power and like what he can connect to and what he can do from a magical census standpoint and correspondences, he's very much attached to death-related rituals and any magic that has to do with like practicing like magic of the dead. So I've seen people like, I personally I have studied what I can about it, because I see it as not closed but a restrictive practice, and I choose to learn restrictive practices but not practice them, if that makes sense. But I have seen and heard of like him being tied to voodoo and hoodoo. I have seen, so again, like those practices I can't answer really much more than that. Like I don't want to because I do not practice it, and it's a restrictive practice, but I have seen that, I have read that, and I have heard that in some of my studies. He can be used in a lot of like cursing or hexing or what a lot of people would consider baneful magic. He can be tied to a lot of, dream work and shadow work and stuff that has to do with collective conscious and subconscious. Death doulas will use him a lot. Funeral directors, those that are around the dead often. You can use him when it comes to mourning the dead, connecting to your dead. Magic that has to do with honoring Persephone is all. I rarely separate the two. These two are so intricately connected. So to honor her and have her be a part of any ritual, any magic, or any altar that has to do with him, would, that's something that he can be attached to magical workings as well. He's very much attached to celebrating Samhain. So any of those rituals that you're going to be doing with Samhain, super, super special time of the year. For him, like his wife's coming back to him, and that's a whole thing. And like the dead celebrated during that time, and those are the souls that he presides over, and like he's really honored during that time as well. And then when it comes to other ways and other magic that he can attach to, he can obviously, with him being connected to Pluto and the subconscious and the emotions and intuition and things like that. Divination's great. He's great with divination magic as well. And duality, anything has to do with duality and balance and liminal spaces. He's fantastic with any of that. Ways that you can also offer him, like I said, the coin, you can make sure that you are making sure that there's a fee, that the fees being paid for those entering the underworld. If you choose to go to graveyards, you can simply just leave coins on gravestones. You can have an altar to the dead and an altar to him specifically, with any of the correspondences that have to do with him. Let's see. I don't think I missed any. And then one ritual that I really, really like to do with him that I did put in here is called the silent ritual. It gives you a chance to honor the dead and Hades as well. Most of the times I do this during Samhain. I try to do it other times as well. Typically, if I do, it'll be on a full moon. But it's really just a dinner. Like it's the silent ritual is really just like a dinner to honor the dead, to honor Hades, to leave a space for them to be at your table. So you make a dinner, you set the table, you set the intention, you create that sacred space, and you leave a spot at the table to honor them. You make sure that you serve them, you honor them in whatever the way that you want. If you're doing a deity, you can place an entire mini altar there if you want to have him be there. If you're doing it for a loved one, you can do a photo of that person's name, anything that attaches that person, anything like that. But you just bring that item to link them to that and to have them be a part of that space so that you can express anything that you need to. And you create this sacred space between you and your loved one, or you and Hades himself. And then you sit in that sacred space after that dinner and you write everything that you need to say, everything that you feel, everything that needs to be processed into a handwritten letter. And then typically I will add like certain herbs or spices to it to help release it, like sage and cinnamon and bay leaves and ginger and cloves. And then I close that letter and then I burn it as a release. So you do that whole dinner for the honor and veneration, and then you have that writing the letter and that releasing part, that shadow work part, to help you move through that in that silent ritual. And it's something that I really love to do that with him. It's very, very cathartic, and it's just the space that he opens up and creates for you to sit in is it's very stilling, and it's very magnetic. That's the best word that's the other best word I can use. Okay. I'm going to jump in here, see if you guys have any questions, any comments. Then I know we're gonna end up a little bit over, but then I am going to let you guys create your sacred space, and I'm gonna bring him for you guys to meet him. Like I had talked about a little bit in the beginning, he may literally just simply sit there and be there and hold you in silence. But it's like I said, it's a very magnetic feeling to have. It's a great place to be in. Okay, so let me check the chat here. Preach about the clairs. I could go on about the clairs. Like he really, really, really helps you open up and attach that. And like the clairs themselves, I know Professor Danielle has a whole class already on the website about it, and I've been thinking about doing my own class on it too, because the clairs are just like such a big deal, and like so many people like don't know about all of them or don't understand like how many like how you can have access to them, and like I use smell a lot. Like I'm so attuned to smell when it comes to my clairs, and I love it. Yes, stillness into water. Yes, necromancy is super connected, and one of those is made from cinnamon. Ooh, I love that, Paul. Okay, so I am reading the chats right now about water and altar. Okay, so give me 1 second. 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 1 second Two options. I pulled off my altar. This is one. This is literally moon water that's completely sealed. So like you have like mason jar, you can have it as a vessel. I even have open bowls like this that I use. I use cups. Sometimes it's simply just a wine cup. I also have goblets. Sometimes it's a shot glass that because like I have shot glasses that I use for things. So like anything that you can have be an actual vessel to put the water in. So a glass bowl, like any of that. Glass of red wine is amazing to use with him. I have a whole bottle right now, by the way, for the altar that I'm using for him here. Yeah. So yes. I hope that clarifies that for you. So like there's lots of ways that you can have that water be a part of your altar. Okay, honey, go ahead.
This is actually a little more random, but okay, Poseidon has a trident.
Yep.
And why we're just talking about him. My brain's not functioning.
Because
Hades
the
has,
bident, I'm guessing?
huh?
Because the bident, I'm guessing?
Yeah. Hades has a Biden but yeah, Zeus has a spear, right? Like 1, 2, 3.
It's Thunderbolt, yep.
Is that like the order they were born? Like
So out of the brothers, technically, yes, that's the order that they came that after Cronus ate them. Before Cronus, no. Does that answer it?
yeah. So after Cronus ate them, Zeus came out, Hades, and Poseidon.
Yep. No, Poseidon then Hades. So it's actually no, it's not in order. You're wrong. I'm wrong. It's wrong. It's not in order. It's just random.
Oh, okay. Cool.
It's just random. See, you had me talk through that. No, yeah, because Hades has 2, and Hades is actually the youngest and the last one to come out.
Okay.
So no, nope. I will actually, you know what? Here. I will spend the next like week trying to dig up like to see like what the theory is and if there's any like work out there as to why they each have, if there's symbology behind the weapons that they have based on the 3 brothers alone. Because there's symbology on each weapon specifically, but I haven't looked into like this correlation. So I'll look into this.
Okay.
I'm sure I can find a video like as soon as I'm done here that will lead me to somewhere.
It could also be that like Zeus is said to be the most powerful. Hades would probably be the second because, dead, a lot of people. While Poseidon is still equally as strong, he would rule over, I don't want to say less, but not as much, I suppose, since he doesn't actually rule over humans themselves or souls.
I get what you're saying.
No. Anyway, okay, just a theory. One last thing. For coins, could like crushed pennies work?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
I don't see why not.
Okay, I didn't know because they're like bronze color copper. So but they're still coins, just crushed. So I didn't know if that would.
I personally have never had an issue with it being a specific type of coin or a specific metal for the coin. I've only had it being that like fare needs to be given. So some type of money, coin, fare needs to be exchanged. I've never come across where it needs to specifically be a certain metal, but everybody's practice is different. So if it feels like it needs to be a specific metal for you, I wouldn't say that it's wrong.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I have a few of them, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Paul.
I like how you say that and then take a big old drink of water.
I'm sorry. I was really thirsty.
Something that Honey actually just touched on with the Trident, Bident, and Lightning Bolt.
What's up? What do you got for me?
Okay. The Lightning Bolt, Earth, Air, Fire, and Water, all 4 elements, all 4 realms.
Yep.
Comes from heaven, goes to the earth, goes under the ground. The Bident, the duality, life, death, masculine, feminine. The Trident, the realm of water, which is affected by planetary as well as gravitational. So maybe there's I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Maybe there is some kind of similarity. You know what the Greeks were like? They were the Greeks were Greeks. No disrespect to any Greek people listening. Um, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I could see it. I could see it as possible. I could see it. I could see it. Makes sense. Makes sense. Makes sense. You have a start for my rabbit hole.
Say again?
Is that you have a start for my rabbit hole now? Because it makes sense.
Right,
All that makes sense.
right. And the photo that I put up in the chat, just so people know what that is, they're the two rings that I always wear. One is my family crest, which is made from silver coins, and the other is a silver owl. I'll let you draw your own conclusions there.
Sorry, real quick. Paul, or what was the first thing you said about the lightning bolt?
The four elements: earth, air, fire, and water.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Any other questions? Anything else that people want to go over? Okay, guys. We're at that part. We're at that time. So my camera goes off. I don't keep my camera on when I'm summoning and stuff because I don't want to distract you guys, and I want to make sure you guys aren't paying attention to me on the screen. So my camera's gonna go off. I am going to be muting myself. While I do that, you guys, this is when you get into, if you've been with me, actually, all of you have been with me before. So this is when I will have you guys, drop in, get in your sacred space, set your sacred container, like create that, get into a meditative state, do what you need to do to get into a place to be open to receiving any messages from Hades, to him coming and sitting in a space with you, and to you possibly meeting him. So because again, everybody's experience is going to be different. I'm really, really, really excited to do this, by the way. Like, my energy's been pretty amped up. I love him. I love experiencing this energy, and I'm excited to share him with you guys. So again, camera's gonna go off. I'm gonna mute myself. I'm gonna get myself ready. When I come back, we're gonna go. And my circle today, by the way, is gonna probably be a little bit different than what you're used to. So just keep that in mind too. Okay, so here you go, guys. I want you to start getting in your sacred space, getting your sacred container, dropping in, meditative state, whatever you call it. When I come back, I will be introducing you to a new deity. Okay, everybody, I hope you're here. I hope you're in a sacred space and sacred container. And I want you to take a few deep breaths in and out. And in and out. I call to the spirits and guide of each person in this circle. I ask you to come closer and encircle us and surround us with protection, wisdom, and connection. I ask that you leave the circle open for the deity with which we are calling to be here today. God of the underworld, Lord Hades. I call to the gatekeepers of the four directions. I call to the guardians as well. I thank you for turning your gaze towards us this afternoon. I honor your sacred presence, and I thank you for your guidance, your guardianship, and your protection. I call to the direction of east and the element of air. I call to the guardians and gatekeepers. I thank you so very much for holding the eastern gateway this afternoon. I call to the direction of south and the element of fire. I call to the guardians and gatekeepers of the southern gateway, and I thank you so very much for being here this afternoon. I call to the direction of west and the element of water. I call to the guardians and gatekeepers, and I thank you so very much for holding the western gateway this afternoon. I call to the direction of north, the element of earth. I call to the guardians and gatekeepers of the northern gateway, and I thank you so very much for holding it this afternoon. I call to the guardians and gatekeepers of both above, below, and all around. I call to all ascended masters. I call to all spirit guides. And I call to summon and invoke the great deity Hades, the dark lord of the underworld. I stand trembling as you approach. You are the king of all uncounted legions of the dead. You are ruler of the hidden wealth. All the hidden wealth that bejewels the caverns beneath the earth. You are darkened by ashes of thousands of years of cremations. You are an invisible one passing through the chaos of humanity completely unseen. You see us and watch us from a distance, held in love, grace, and compassion. We come and go, but you, oh dear Hades, you are eternal in your watching. You help us see through the darkness of never-ending cycles. You hold us in a space of stillness to mourn and to honor those that we love, to honor our journey into the dark realm, to honor our life and all of everything that there is after it. You do not sit there and hold us in damnation and judgment, but you hold us in the stillness and the reality of our existence and our perception. You give us grace in the next life, and you allow us to sit in our actions. Oh dear Hades, the god of the underworld, you watch over the spirits of the deceased. You are a true liberator of justice, for you have always kept the peace. The spirits are at your mercy, and your word is law. I ask you to aid us today. I ask you to represent yourself to us. I ask you to send any messages. I ask you to create a space of stillness, a space of reflection, a space of intuition, a space that is deep, deep, deep into the recesses of our emotions and our subconscious. I ask that you allow us to sit in reflection and hear the messages. That let us reflect on the reality of our existence, reality of our choices, and the reality of our perspectives. I want everybody to take a few deep breaths in and out. As you start to feel the energy move within your sacred space. You notice the small amount of energy that's off in the corner. You feel it, but you can't quite see it. You feel the emotions coming off of it. You feel the stillness. You feel the alertness. You feel this immense pull. That part of your sacred space. To that corner, to that seat, to that table, wherever this spot is. You take a few deep breaths in and a few deep breaths out, and you notice how your body feels. Is there a part of your body that's getting colder? Is there a part of your body that's drawing alertness? If so, is there emotion attached to that part of the body? Is there a memory starting to flood? Are you starting to feel something come forward to you? A few deep breaths in and a few deep breaths out. And pull your attention back to that spot where you just know that there's something there. You feel it, that energy's there, but you just don't quite see it. And I ask that now you be willing to move towards it, however you feel comfortable to move. Move towards it without apprehension, without fear, and without anxiety. Are you starting to see an outline of the energy? Are you starting to see a figure, a shape, a color? Do you smell something? Do you feel something? Do you taste something? Do you hear something? As you move closer towards the spot of energy, try to hone in and notice what it is exactly around you. Do you hear the sounds of dogs barking? Do you taste red wine? Do you smell a narcissa flower? Do you feel the stillness and the tides of the emotions all at once? Do you have memories flooding to you that you haven't felt in many years? As you keep moving forward, continue to open up your willingness to the stillness. Continue to open up your willingness to the darkness. Continue to harness and focus on that energy in that spot. That once that you reach it, you may be able to see what's there. A few deep breaths in and a few deep breaths out. Now you should be at that place where the unseen has been sitting. The invisible one has been sitting there and waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to be willing to come forward, waiting for you to be willing to sit in that stillness, watching, observing, taking in every action, every word, and everything that you've done. And greet him. Greet this energy. Greet it with an openness and with openness to the stillness, openness to that emotion, openness to whatever memory you may be feeling and thinking. If it's grief and you have a person coming up for you, accept it. Sit in it. Allow him to feel it with you. Allow that heart center to open. Allow the fear and the dogma and the uncertainness of the afterlife to cloud what you are feeling right now. As you're sitting in this energy, as you're sitting next to him, as you're facing him, as you're standing with him, whatever it may be, now that you are open to it, now that you are shown to him, now that he is shown to you, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Are you remembering things? Are you hearing things? Are you smelling things? Experience the vastness of the stillness, of the blackness, of the gold mixed in with the obsidian around you. Experience the vast fullness that the empty stillness can have at the same time. Stillness is so full of emotion, of intuition, of guidance, of messages. Stillness is full of rebirth. It's full of death. It's full of transformation. It's full of growth. Stillness is where you truly evolve, is where you truly move forth. Ask Lord Hades what it is he has to show you in this space of stillness he has created. What it is he has observed that you have not. What it is that he has watched that you have not been willing to open up your eyes to perceive. Especially if it has to do with relationships. He can really, really help with that. With balance and duality, with holding your partner in grace, with venerating your partner, with understanding the balance between power. If you need help in your relationship, now is a great time to ask him about those questions. What is it that he's seen from an outside perspective? What has he observed? What has he witnessed? What is possibly hiding in the shadows that needs to be brought forth to the light? As you're sitting in this space, remember to be aware of the surroundings, what you see, of what you feel, of what you think, of what you're remembering, what you're hearing and tasting and smelling. All of those will be signs and messages and things to pay attention to, reflect once you leave here. Become familiar with the energy in the space. What do you see? Do you see a tall bearded man holding a bident and Cerberus just on his lap? Is he sitting on his throne with Persephone next to him? Are you simply just sitting in the shadows, watching the world move by in stillness? Are you out in the Elysian fields, having joy in the afterlife? Is he in your sacred space? If so, is he sitting in the shadows or is he out in the open with you? Take all of this in for remembrance to come back to next time you choose to come and meet with him. As you take all this in, ask Lord Hades one more time if there's anything else that he needs to convey to you, anything else that you need to feel, any memory that needs to come up. Is there a loved one that you need to honor more in your life and connect to more in your practice? Do you need to speak to his wife more, connect to Persephone more, through duality and balance and power? How can he help you with your divine masculine energy and bring balance to you? Ask him any and all of these, or none. Ask him anything that you need to now in this space. As you hear the final message that you are getting from him, thank him for coming and being willing to meet with you. Thank him for the information he was able to give to you through his observations and stillness. Thank you for what he is allowing you to work through and release through bringing up memories and intuition. If you're going to meet again, say so. If you want to make plans now, you can do so. If not, you can leave it open-ended. If you'd like to create a connection, to create a relationship with him, let him know. Thank him, gratitude and respect and honor. Take one more final inventory of what you see, of what you feel, of what you think, any memories, what you smell, taste, and hear. I thank you, dear Hades, God of the underworld, the watcher over the spirits of deceased and the true liberator of justice. I thank you so very much for being here, for aiding me in this circle, for aiding me in this shadow work session, for aiding me in any of my castings going forward. I thank you for being willing to be a guide and a messenger for each and every soul within this circle this afternoon. I ask if anybody's wanting to meet with you again, that you be open and willing and try to continue to create that connection and that relationship. I am so very humbled and so very honored you were willing to present yourself here today. And I release you. I call back the guardians and gatekeepers, the ascended masters, the spirit guides, and any other entities and energies that were here with us today for protection, guidance, wisdom, and connection. And I release you. I call back the direction of north and the element of air. And I thank you so very much for holding a northern gateway this afternoon. And I release you. I call back the guardians and gatekeepers, the direction of west and the element of water. I thank you so very much for holding the western gateway this afternoon. And I release you. I call back the guardians and gatekeepers of the direction of south and the element of fire. I thank you so very much for holding the southern gateway this afternoon, and I release you. I call back the guardians and gatekeepers of direction of east and the element of air. I thank you so very much for holding the eastern gateway this afternoon, and I release you. I call back all guardians, gatekeepers, ascended masters, spirit guides, and any other entities from above, below, and all around. I thank you so much for holding all of the gateways this afternoon, and I release you. Amen. Aho. So moved it is. Okay, guys. That's it. I hope that was everything that you wanted. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to stretch after doing that. That's a lot of energy. Awesome place. I hope that was everything you wanted. I hope that was everything that you needed. And I thank you so, so, so very much for allowing me to hold you in that sacred space and for allowing me to have you meet one of my deities. So if you guys have any questions, anything that you want to say, you definitely can if you would like to. Otherwise, that is class for today. I know it went a little bit longer than it was supposed to, so thank you for waiting with me and sticking it out. And I do know that I do have a 2-year-old who's waiting for me too. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being here with me today. Does anything have anything that they want to say or ask at all today? You're welcome, Morgan. Okay. I have a direct message to me. I can expand on that for you. I am going to make a note of it. But can you please send me a DM? I don't know if I want to say your name just because you messaged me privately and it's a pretty private thing you put in there about a deity. So can you message me? Can you send me a direct DM so I know who you are on Facebook so I can respond to that for you? Because that's actually, yeah, that's a thing. So send me a DM so that I know who you are specifically on Facebook. And sometimes Zoom names are different on Facebook, so sometimes I can't find you guys when I try to afterwards. So yes, do that. I took notes of what you sent me so that I have it. Fabulous. Do that. Okay. Lindsay, thank you. Thank you. Honey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Fabulous. Okay. Thank you so much. Again, guys, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me directly through DM. You can also reach out to me for any one-on-one like guidance and like deity sessions as well through my website, modgepodgemystic.com, and on my Facebook page for them as well. And let's see. Tonight too, with my temple, Temple of Divine Sacred Truths, I actually have my first ever humanity circle tonight. If you've never sat in sacred space working with the collective unconscious, I highly recommend coming because that's what I'm doing tonight is I'm opening up the collective unconscious. I'm not doing it through the Akashic record. That's a little different, but we're gonna sit in like really sacred space like together in the collective unconscious tonight. So I'm really, really excited to do that. If you're interested in doing that, you can join me tonight too for that. Otherwise, I think my next class here is Thursday, and I believe it's Sex Magic Part 2. I might be wrong. If I am, I'm sorry. I need to know what my schedule is better, and I should get better at that. But thank you so much for being here, guys. I really, really, really appreciate it. And it means a lot to me. Have a good rest of your day, guys.